currently own over $500,000 in real estate across 3 properties in 2 states. So needless to say, I like real estate, and I'm going to continue to invest in real estate as we move forward. But why invest in real estate in the first place? What are the main advantages to investing in something like real estate as opposed to maybe another investment? So in this video, I'm going to go over the 4 biggest benefits to investing in real estate. The first factor is probably the one that most people are familiar with, at least if you're at all interested in real estate, and that is cash flow, in that the property will throw off income and it'll pay for the expenses on that property, and what's left over is your cash flow. That is money you can spend on whatever you want to do, and that's how a lot of people can create a substantial income by investing in real estate, because it's actually throwing off rental income, and whatever's left over is yours to keep. Real estate can be a pretty effective way to produce extra income compared to many other investments, which might lock up your cash for a while without actually producing any income in the meantime. Yes, you're locking up your cash in real estate. It's a very capital intensive thing in that sense. But in the meantime, once it starts getting rented out, it's going to throw off income in the meantime. And I will say that especially in euphoric times where prices might be going up pretty rapidly, people might buy real estate without really worrying about cash flow, or they think that more cash flow will come in the future, which could happen, but banking on that to happen is very risky, because if you don't get that growth, then you're stuck with negative cash flow and you don't have as many options when that happens, because now what are you going to do when you lose your job and you can't pay for the debt or the expenses on the property because the rental income that it's throwing off isn't enough? This is where something like reserves is very important, but the fact remains that real estate is a very effective tool for creating additional income. You just have to buy the thing, rent it out for more than your expenses, and that's it. So I definitely made that sound a little bit easier than it probably really is. The next biggest benefit to real estate investing is appreciation. So this is the other side of cash flow. Whereas cash flow is money in your pocket right now, appreciation refers to the value of that property increasing. And oftentimes when cash flow on the property increases, the value of the underlying property will also increase. This is definitely the case with something like commercial real estate, which is valued based on the income that the property is throwing off. But with something like a home or a residential property that is based on sales comparables, that might be a little bit decoupled from the cash flow numbers, but still, typically they're going to go up in the same direction. Or they might go down at the same time, but hey, this video is about the benefits of real estate. We don't care about the negatives right now. But especially if you're in a growing market where the value of properties is going up because there are more people moving to an area, and eventually it becomes hard to build new units and new housing or new properties, the value of that real estate can go up pretty rapidly, and you can make some pretty substantial returns. And this can often be way more than your cash flow that you might be making on that property. Even if the property is break even on a cash flow basis, you're not actually getting any cash flow out of the property, you can still make huge appreciation depending on what's going on in your market. Or if you do something like force appreciation onto the property, where you're rehabbing it, you're improving it, you're bringing it up to market standards, you're making it more valuable that way by putting your sweat equity or putting actual money into the property. Now would be a good time to emphasize that not every market is the same. Some markets will see drastically more appreciation than another one. Another one might be shrinking and losing property value. So what you're going to get on appreciation and cash flow growth for that matter is going to be very different from market to market, even if the broader real estate market is looking really good or even looking really bad. Sometimes a local submarket will do the exact opposite of what the broader market is doing. But whatever the case, appreciation can get supercharged once you introduce a little something called debt. Now, debt, or leverage as it's often called, is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you're bringing other people's money to the deal, so you're able to leverage that money to produce you more money in the meantime. That's how you can produce greater returns with debt. You get to control the whole deal, but you are only bringing a small portion of the money to get that deal, but you get to keep all the upside. You get to keep all the downside as well, but excuse me, we're still talking about benefits here. The real estate debt terms are by far some of the best debt terms out there. You're typically going to have the longest terms, often 30 years in the case of many US mortgages. You're often looking at fixed rates, so your mortgage interest rate isn't going to change over the life of that 30-year mortgage in many cases. And sometimes it might be fixed for only 5 years or some shorter term than 30 years, but still, you typically are going to get a lower rate compared to your average loan that might not be attached to real estate, and you're often going to get a very long term. And on top of that, you often can finance the vast majority of a particular deal depending on how you want to structure things. In some cases, if you're using an owner-occupied loan where you're going to live in the property for a year before you go and rent it out, you only have to bring 5, 3.5, or even 0% down in some cases. So you're only bringing a very small fraction of the overarching deal to actually get into it. That's how I financed this property. I only brought 5% down to the deal. It's 2.99% interest fixed for 30 years, so that payment is not going to move outside of my taxes and expenses and all that. But the mortgage itself is not changing, and it is fixed at that low rate. And I only had to bring a small fraction of the price myself to the deal. The bank took care of the rest. And once we move out of this property pretty soon, we're going to rent it out. And then the rent that this property throws off will go towards paying down that mortgage and producing a little bit of cash flow if all goes well. Do keep in mind that the more debt you use, the more income you're going to need that property to throw off to take care of your monthly expenses. Makes sense. The bigger the debt, the bigger the payment, and the more risk you're taking. So you definitely have to tread carefully with any amount of debt you're using, but real estate in general does offer some really great financing terms. And when used responsibly and effectively, they can produce really substantial returns. So we've covered the benefits of cash flow, appreciation, and debt when it comes to real estate. But there's a fourth benefit that a lot of people often overlook when it comes to buying real estate, and that's tax benefits. When you buy real estate, you often unlock a number of tax deductions that can be used to either offset your rental income, or in some cases, completely whittle down your other income when it comes to your business or even on your personal taxes in some situations. So in many cases, just with the depreciation deduction, real estate investors can offset the majority, if not the entirety, of the rental income that a particular property is throwing off. And that's exactly what I was able to do with my rental properties this year. I was able to write off the vast majority of my rental income based on all the deductions that real estate offers, in particular depreciation. But you can often write off many other things like mortgage interest, the expenses used to run the property management fees. Pretty much any expense when it comes to running a real estate business can often get written off. And even if you're a homeowner, you can take advantage of certain deductions. Maybe you have a home office, that can potentially be deducted. You can often write off the mortgage interest on your personal residence as well. Definitely talk with a tax professional to go over this sort of stuff, because I am not one of those. I'm just telling you about some of the many benefits that are out there and you could potentially take advantage of. Tax returns, especially with real estate involved, can get pretty complicated, but that complexity can yield some pretty substantial results in whittling down your tax bill. So again, definitely talk with a tax professional if you're looking to do something like that. You're probably going to be able to find many more deductions than you'd be able to find on your own anyways, and they'll make sure you do it correctly. Not to mention the tax code is always subject to change, so you never know what's really going to happen year to year, and you should revisit all of those potential deductions every single year. And one other thing I'll mention with the tax side of things is something called a 1031 exchange. We'll see if this is around for much longer, but it is a very useful tool for real estate investors in particular who want to sell their property at a gain, avoid paying taxes on that gain because they're able to roll it into another property. And once you roll it into that new property, subject to a number of restrictions, you got to be careful that you actually follow, so check up on those. But you won't have to pay taxes on the actual sale of the property, which had a gain on it, which you normally would have to pay taxes for. In other words, you're able to defer the capital gains taxes that you would have had on that rental property because you rolled it into another bigger rental property in the meantime. So it's a way to effectively snowball your real estate portfolio in a tax-free manner without having to pay taxes on the potentially massive capital gains that you're taking on, because the 1031 exchange is very powerful for that purpose. So there have been talks to alter or get rid of the 1031 exchange, but I thought I'd mention it here since it's one of the many very powerful tools when it comes to the tax code for real estate investing. So those are four of the biggest benefits when it comes to investing in real estate: cash flow, appreciation, debt, and tax benefits. There are other benefits as well, but those are four of the biggest. Otherwise, like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. But until next time, take care.